7th. We have got a big show for you tonight with four, count them, four featured guests, including two that are going to call in. We're talking medical marijuana here, what is happening in Vermont. We've got Chris Walsh from Vermont Grassroots, one of the dispensaries, calling in and joining us. Jessilyn Dolan from Homegrown Consultants and the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association. And our featured guest, Janik from Homegrown Vermont, my kind of Jamaica, Kevin Driscoll, part of the Heady Vermont team, registered patient. Got a lot ahead of us, including a Hemp Fest update. First, we're going to play some music and get to the news. Shout out to Lost Nation. Cheers. All right, welcome back everybody. It is Monday, August 27th, and we have got our first caller calling in already. A little early, we're not quite ready for that yet. We are going to get started. It's live TV, folks, what you get. We are going to get started first with a little bit of news for you. So our first update, we're talking about hemp. This is big news. Illinois has passed one of the most farmer-friendly hemp laws in the country. This is Hemp Industry Daily. You can find it on MJ Biz Daily as well. And you can see the governor approves hemp law aimed at commercial production. So this is actually very similar to the Vermont law in that there is not a limit on the number of licenses, not a limit on acreage, not a limit on processing. So this is, I think, a huge step, big Midwestern state with a lot of huge industrial scale farming. So game changer with hemp. Things continue to evolve. We're going to be talking a little bit more about hemp evolution, so we'll come back to that. But in the meantime, closer to home here in Massachusetts, just south of us, the state has licensed 2 of their marijuana labs. This is the Boston Business Journal, and I'd encourage you to read this entire article. There's some really good sort of step back and review kind of how the whole Mass system is set up. But as you can see from the title, sales have not really begun full speed, and part of that is a requirement that all cannabis that is sold be tested. So this is something that we're going to have to think about here in Vermont because tax and regulate is going to be a huge topic. Everybody's interested in testing, but as these articles and others point out, testing is very expensive, and there are only certain labs who are licensed to do it. So definitely worth pointing out and paying attention to what's happening here in Massachusetts with these laws. Even closer to home, Kevin, do you mind grabbing my laptop cord from downstairs, please? Or Fran, one of you guys?
We're wired.
Closer to home,
Are you wired?
this is reported by Marijuana Moment, and I'd like to give a shout out to our friend Dave Silberman, back from Hawaii and already making national news. You can go rest that way. This is pretty self-explanatory from the headline here. The Vermont Democratic Party calls for marijuana legalization expansion. So this is actually part of the party platform in 2018, as we understand this article, reported by Tom Angel. Again, if you read this here, you can get to the platform. It says, "We believe that marijuana should be legal, taxed, regulated in the interests of consumer and public health and economic opportunity. We recognize that the war on drugs has been disproportionately focused on people of color and those with low incomes, and urge the adoption of non-discriminatory public health-based approaches. We support ensuring that the collateral consequences of criminal convictions do not last a lifetime by enabling people more to clear their records after having repaid their debt to society. To do this, we must expand access and reduce financial bureaucratic barriers to expungement." So that's what's happening. Big news. One more shout out. Vermont Grow Coach. Pop that back up there, Sean. Vermont Grow Coach. In the news, in the Rutland Herald, talking about some of their classes. So shout out to Tom. He was a great guest to have last week. And we're happy to see that he's already picking up some attention here. So encourage you guys to check this out in the Rutland Herald, the Vermont Grow Coach. All right, bringing this on, we've got our first guest calling in. So let's pick this up. Hey, Walsh, can you hear us?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. You are on with the live. So we are on live right now. Just a heads up. I'm sorry that we were a little late in getting started out here.
No worries.
So, Chris, maybe you could just start by introducing yourself and your title for those that do not recognize you from the radio ads or your time here in Burlington.
So my current job, I became managing director of Grassroots Vermont, which is the dispensary in Brandon 2 months ago. I also opened the Green State Gardener Grow Store 2 years ago on Pine Street, and co-founder of Upstate Elevator Supply CBD Company, and long-term owner of Nectars on Main Street.
Exactly. Well, and I know we had a chance to meet a couple years ago with the Cannabis Collaborative, and you've done a ton of huge things in the meantime. So from CBD to retail and now in the actual dispensary business. And I want to talk to you tonight because we want to start with sort of the dispensary perspective. You're somebody who has been familiar with the Vermont program for a while. And I wonder, maybe you got the first word tonight, if you could kind of give us a little bit of a recap of how you understand the program, how you decided to get involved directly with the medical, and what you guys are doing down there in Brandon.
I've been a medical card holder for the last 4 years. This is going on my 5th year. I just renewed. And, you know, I was a card holder at a couple of the other dispensaries. Thought that the program could be greatly improved. Spent a lot of time in Colorado and California. I have a lot of friends out there. I used to live in California. I worked in the film business before I bought Nectars. You know, I sort of transitioned from Nectars day to day, wanted to get into cannabis, saw the emerging market coming, sort of eased into it by doing a grow store in Burlington and a CBD company, but really wanted to get into the, which I didn't even know this term existed until I got into it, into the plant handling sector.
The plant handling sector, okay.
The plant handling sector of the biological assets. I'm learning a whole new language.
This is what you guys have to put on your tax returns, right? So you can.
It's a funny language, but you know, so that's, I feel like I'm in the zeitgeist, you know, the sort of the middle of the middle. You can't get any more into the inside than really the plant handling sector of the medical program.
So what's it like on the inside of the program? I mean, we know, you know, people are on the outside. We know that there are only 5 licenses. You guys were, I want to say the 3rd. I think that was issued. What do the dispensaries kind of go through? You know, you guys have an annual license fee, and then how many plants do you get to go, and how many facilities do you guys get to have? If you could kind of just set the stage for people that don't actually know how it works.
I'm not going to get too specific because I'm still getting the lay of the land. I mean, between all the standard operating procedures and rules and regulations of being compliant with dispensary. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. Plant count, I'm not going to get into exacts, but it has to do with how many patients you have. There's a correlation between patients and plant count. What else did you ask me? Sorry.
Well, that and I about the licensure as well. You guys have, I believe, the dispensaries. It's $25,000 a year to operate a dispensary in Vermont, right?
That's a renewal fee, correct?
That's the renewal fee. So $25,000 per year. You guys are in Brandon. You're now allowed to operate a second location, right? So you guys are going to be opening up another satellite location, right?
Yeah, we're in the process of getting that approved right now.
All right, and so 2 big questions. One, you know, sitting where you are, and you're somebody who's been a patient, you know, been a grower, and I know you guys do classes down there at Green State, and you know, you're master grower. now you're a dispensary operator. So wearing all these hats at once, what do you want to see happen with changing the Vermont Medical Marijuana program? How do we get started?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of good in it, and you know, we are a small state. There's a limited amount of people. There's, you know, a lot of the rules. Once I've sort of gotten into, you know, from the inside looking out, makes sense. You know, Department of Public Safety is really, their biggest concern is diversion, making sure that the medicine is actually going to card holders and it's not disappearing. And they're being very thorough about that. The one rule that drives me nuts, and I don't understand the logic to it, especially since the majority of the people are in Chittenden County. And, you know, I've been to a bunch of other states, and I've purchased adult rec and medical marijuana. And the whole sort of how you're, you know, joined to the hip of one dispensary drives me nuts. And I don't really understand the logic behind it. As a card holder, you should be able to go anywhere you want. If I'm in Southern Vermont, I should be able to go to the dispensary in Brattleboro. If I'm in Chittenden County, I should be able to go to the dispensary in Burlington. But, you know, maybe I'm visiting friends in Montpelier. I mean, you know, I firmly believe in spreading the wealth around. And it also, there's not a lot of competition right now because there's only 5 dispensaries. But the way you make people, you know, have prices that are competitive and good quality medicine is to have at least a little bit of a competition between the dispensaries, and there's none because you basically commit to one, and they you know, that you have no options. You're only allowed to be serviced to one designated dispensary.
And that's something I've heard the other operators talk about, and you're right. I mean, that's the thing that I think people don't understand, and a lot of legislators don't understand. It's like, imagine if you could only go to, you know, if you could only go to Kinney Drugs and not CVS or something, right, to buy the same, pick up the same medicine.
It doesn't make any sense. And, you know, here I am, the little guy down in Brandon. We have less than 1,000 patients. And you would think if anybody's saying, oh, no, you got to commit to one, it would be me. But then you have, you know, the bigger dispensaries and like, you know, CBDs probably has 3 times the amount of patients we have. So I think everybody can afford to share patients. I think that's, you know, that's...
Well, and also if we talk about what's, you know, out-of-state card holders too, you know, that's something we're going to talk about with patients tonight, is that you can go to Maine, show your Vermont card, and go purchase from the dispensary. So I assume that you would welcome out-of-state card holders being able to buy in Vermont dispensaries too, right?
Yeah, the whole reciprocity thing. I mean, I just experienced it in California where, you know, it's adult rec, so I didn't really need to whip out my Vermont medical card, but I did anyway, and I'm glad I did because they actually gave me the in-state tax structure or tax level, which is a lot lower than adult rec, which we can get into because I know that's one of your topics tonight, but you know, California does it. A bunch of states do it. I know there's talk of it in state. We're such a tourist state, especially in the winter with skiing and stuff. I mean, if you had people being able to use out-of-state cards, it would be fantastic for the ski industry. I think it would be a reason alone just to come here versus New Hampshire or Maine to ski.
Well, and I think that's such a no-brainer, right? Especially if we look at how many more cards there are in New York now than there were a year ago. I mean, these other states around us are blowing up with their medical programs too.
Yeah, I agree.
So that one seems like another, you know, clear, obvious point. What do you guys think about, you know, buying from outside growers? You know, this is something I've talked about a lot, is that we just don't have enough supply in this state for present or future, you know, going from 5,000 patients to 50,000 to 500,000 with tourists, right?
Yep.
What do you think about dispensaries being able to purchase cannabis from small, individually licensed growers? You know, this 1,000 square foot, or kind of this idea of like a craft, some other kind of supply.
I'm all for it. I think it's the Vermont way. I think it probably is coming in the next year or so. Again, it makes everybody very competitive, and, you know, may the best medicine win. It'll bring the price per pound down. I can't think of a downside. I can understand, again, now that I'm in the middle of this and seeing the inner workings and really seeing the like cogs of the clock and how complicated it is to really regulate and oversee the compliance. So I really do respect what DPS is doing, and I think they have their hands full. And, you know, again, we need to sort of ease into the non-vertically integrated setup where you have somebody growing and selling to whichever dispensary wants to buy it. But again, diversion seems to be the operative word with DPS, and it's their biggest concern. So, you know, that's where the diversion could get a little bit out of whack.
What do you think about, well, I mean, speaking about diversion, like I talk about this with legislators, and I say having DPS overseeing the medical program, you know, law enforcement overseeing medical is like the lactose intolerance society overseeing the dairy program, right? Do you think there's any chance for structural change where law enforcement are not the ones who are in charge of medical marijuana? And is that something that you would lobby for? Or, you know, I mean, they're going to be part of the process, but inside that program?
I think the way it should go is I just was at a conference and was heckled by dispensary owners in other states. The running joke with Vermont now, and I'm getting this more and more at these conventions and symposiums, is they're like, so wait, you run a dispensary in Vermont and there's no third-party testing? You can test your own medicine? How the hell does that work? And then they start laughing. And, you know, I'm not sure about this, but it sounds from the feedback I'm getting and the constant teasing that we might be the only state where the dispensaries get to test their own medicine. You know, and it is, to me, I think the reason everyone chuckles is they roll their eyes and they think it's kind of the fox guarding the hen house. So, you know, I think Department of Ag should take over testing. And I know they're implementing a pilot program, but I think Department of Ag should be the third-party tester, testing all the medicine in the state, both CBD, hemp, and THC for all the dispensaries and the adult rec when that comes on board. And I think, honestly, call me sympathetic because I'm a bar owner, but I think Department of Liquor Control has the infrastructure right now to become the sort of compliant checking enforcement arm of the marijuana registry.
Well, and it sounds like they're very much interested in it. And I know, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, you mentioned that lack of third-party testing. This is something we hear from patients and from caregivers. So knowing you're in support of that, and I think, you know, the idea of having the state do it, we're reading about this in Colorado. It's really a costly proposition. If you leave it up to the private sector, nobody can compete. So,
well, you know, you're right. I'm not just supporting it. I'm walking the talk. We don't do our own testing because we know that our medicine is clean, and we're, you know, we encourage the transparency. So we're trying to, you know, put our money where our mouth is and actually do 100% third-party testing for all of our medicine. We're the only dispensary that does it.
Wow. Well, that is, that's why I'm happy that we had you on. You know, I think that a lot of people learned a bunch, and I know that we're going to talk more in the future and get you on here to talk more about what's happening down in Brandon. But before we let you go, Walsh, I want to ask you about tax and regulate. Do you think in the future?
I'll be quick.
Yeah. Do you think in the future we've got there's one regulatory scheme, and you either pay taxes as an adult use, or you don't as a medical, or how do medical and adult use come together when we start talking tax and regulate?
Again, I think Colorado and California, who are a couple years ahead of us, I always feel like I time travel when I go out there. You know, they're kind of doing what we'll be doing 3 or 4 years from now. And I think they have it right. It's not like, you know, totally black and white. They basically, the reason people still get their cards in California and in Colorado is because you get a savings on the sales tax, and I do believe that a medical patient that's using this strictly for medicine should not be charged the same as somebody using it recreationally or a tourist coming in. I do also think California and Colorado are smart in letting the limits of a medical card holder be higher than a recreational user. I mean, if you're recreational, you don't need to have access to constant medicine. I think there's a legitimate argument for a medical card holder having or being allowed to walk around with a larger supply, bigger consumption ability. The other thing that you see in California and Colorado is that, especially with edibles, the medical patients who might be using an edible for something as, struggling with chemotherapy or nausea or wasting disease or, some real challenging physical issues should be able to buy a much stronger edible than someone that's, buying a chocolate bar for just having fun on the weekend. So those are the big three for me. I think it's stronger products, bigger limits, and sales tax savings. And I think, you've earned that if you have your medical card.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I really appreciate your time, Chris. I know that we're going to talk again. People can get more information. Grassroots. What's your website? Say it again properly out here.
It's grassrootsvermont.com, and our Facebook page is looking really good these days. We're posting a lot of great photos and some articles about cannabinoids and lots of educational stuff. So all of a sudden our Facebook page and our Instagram accounts are taking off, so everybody should check those out.
Awesome. All right. Well, you heard it. Interact with them on Facebook. You know exactly what you're getting with that.
Yep.
You're welcome, man.
Yep.
Walsh, I really appreciate the time, and like you said, the transparency and willing to come on and talk. I know we'll have follow-up questions, and we'll do this again in a few weeks after HempFest.
Yeah, I look forward to that, and thanks a lot for having me, Eli.
All right. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
You too, buddy. Bye.
All right. Have a good one. All right, fellas. Thank you very much to Chris Walsh for coming on and for joining us here. I didn't even introduce you guys earlier. We're in such a rush and trying to get caught up, but really, really interesting conversation. Before we get Jessilyn, why don't you guys introduce yourselves so that the folks at home know who is joining us here in studio.
I'm Fran Janik from Vermont Homegrown, and also my new company is going to be My Kind of Jamaica, and I'll be doing consulting with medical patients and others.
All right, awesome.
Great introduction.
Well, thanks.
I'm Kevin Driscoll. I'm a medical patient, worked in the medical and rec industry for a little bit now, and now here working with Heady, Vermont. Really excited to see what Vermont starts to do.
I suppose I should say that I'm a medical advocate as well, and I've been advocating for patients for the last 5 years in the State House.
And now we can all smoke on camera, but you guys are patients as well. Yes. So I really want to thank Walsh again. I met him a few years ago, and through the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, actually, which is very educational for everybody.
I believe we both met him then.
Now with Grassroots Vermont, I mean the independent third-party testing.
Yes.
Talking about that, talking about kind of how those three big differences, and talking about how people in other states think about Vermont, and kind of where some of the things in our program are and are not. I kind of want to get your guys' reaction. What was the most surprising thing that you heard from a dispensary perspective? And have either of you guys are you guys patients of Grassroots Vermont or?
No. To be fair, I am. So
okay.
I will say that.
Disclosure, right?
I've always remained just a grower and independent of any of the dispensaries, so that I can be independent in my opinions of the situation.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have to say that what we were listening kind of off the phone here, so I didn't quite catch it all. But what I heard Mr. Walsh say tonight was quite refreshing. We're in a situation now where our program has kind of stagnated due to legislation, the restrictions the dispensaries are put under, the fees that they have to deal with, and of course the money that can disappear from our program at any given time, aka the $300,000 that went missing to the general fund. But again, to see this new general manager come into this dispensary with what I heard on today is very refreshing. I think it's excellent.
Yeah. Well, and I think for everybody, right, we want to talk about medical, and we don't want it to be, there have been a lot of factions in the past. People who are involved with the dispensaries, who are home growers, who are caregivers, who have different interests, right? So
yeah, well,
it's nice when everybody's having conversations together, even if we don't always agree on every single part, or we find out that we do. Yeah. On a lot of them.
Absolutely, Eli. And I was the first individual to carry a plant into a dispensary and give the first cloning class at VPA. So I'm not anti-dispensary at any time. We're all pro-patient, And what we want to do is get affordable, effective, clean medicine to the patient. So I think that's the most important thing.
Well, you said the magic words. Speaking of clean and medicine, Jessilyn, are you on the line?
I am. How you doing?
Hey, doing awesome. Thank you for joining us. I'm just pulling up your website here.
Of course.
Jessilyn, thank you very much for joining us. Maybe we can start with just a basic introduction of who you are here. I'm going to go ahead and put your website up here so people can see your lovely face. But maybe you could start with a little bit of background, and especially as it relates to medical marijuana.
Sure. Yeah, I have to stop listening to you so I can talk and not do both at the same time. Sure. I'm a nurse specializing more in opioid use than anything else. I'm also a former herbalist, studied with Rosemary Gladstar a couple of decades ago, and I've had my hands in cultivating and crafting since the 90s, and just like to combine it all.
Awesome. So I'm putting up the Burlington Free Press article. Medical experts offer tips for smarter, safer weed use. Let's start with kind of your appraisal of what's going on with the medical marijuana program today, and sort of what your perspective is as somebody who's a patient, a caregiver, and a medical professional.
Sure. Honestly, it was just patients contacting me before I really knew that there was a problem and a shortage going on. I had people just reaching out to me over and over, and I was pretty surprised and bummed that there was such a lack of medicine, let alone the quality and the cost of medicine. So that was my real first inkling of knowing that we had such a big problem going on here.
So, and when you talk about kind of problem, what do you hear most often, or sort of, I mean, I guess we can kind of recap with some of the basic ones, right? That patients usually have not enough, too expensive, and I think a lot of the times complaints have been about quality, right? I mean, sort of, what have you heard as far as when you talk about people's criticisms of the program, or your own and what you've learned?
Oh, you nailed it. I mean, those are the top three. My number one, as you know, is the quality, and is this medicine organic? And we already addressed with Chris that we're not doing the third-party testing, which is so important. I've been hearing for a long time that the product quality isn't there, and I've seen that firsthand myself. I've went to the dispensary and just grabbed 1 gram of everything to just kind of test it and see what they had, and I have not been impressed myself personally. Let alone, only allowing patients 2 ounces, and the cost being something that's not affordable for most Vermonters. Then to hear that there's not even an option for them to purchase it if they do have the money because it's not available. So it just kind of compounded itself.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about kind of some of the shortages that we've heard about, because we do know at least one dispensary, and we don't want to get into calling out each and every one for each and every one of their failings and what we've heard, but generally speaking, when we hear about supply shortages, what are we hearing, and kind of, is it getting better, getting worse? Is there a specific cause? Is it, just because of the regulations, or help us dig into that a little bit more when you talk about kind of supply shortages?
Really, I'm just hearing from the patients, so I'm not directly getting the information from the dispensaries. I'm hearing that there's no flour, that they're only allowed very limited flour, if there is any, that patients who are using the oil, they then can't get oil. They're being told to use other products. So just really not having what patients need, let alone having medicine to cure. When I think of medicine, I think of curative medicine for cancer, let alone the medicine that's just for symptoms of nausea. So we have extremes of people needing a little bit of medicine, people needing a lot of medicine for life-saving reasons, and we're not able to offer either.
So when we talk about supply shortages, I mean, the dispensaries are limited to two plants per patient, right? Right. 2 mature plants per patient, and each dispensary is competing against each other, essentially. The more patients you have, you can only be a patient at one dispensary, right? So,
correct.
is the most immediate way to fix this with the dispensaries for them to have more plants per patient? You know, if every dispensary could have 4 plants per patient, do you get the impression, you know, that would help at least part of this, right?
Well, if they're already struggling with consistency and quality, giving them more plants, do we really think they have the skill level to handle that? I would question that myself. When I look at, you know, an emergency situation, which I see this as an emergency situation, if the state was out of fentanyl or prednisone or meloxicam, we would be finding a way to have this medicine for patients. So when you look back into the 90s and 96 in San Francisco, you had a state of emergency called where growers were coming out of the closet, small craft organic growers, and legally supplying the patients that did not have their medicine. So how are we not looking at this as a state of emergency from a state level perspective?
So I've asked this before. I mean, because again, I kind of see it from the systems level and where a lot of these different failings are. Supporting, you know, I assume you would support licensing small scale growers, even if they were able to sell through the dispensaries?
If they had some kind of third-party quality assurance testing, so we are using organic growing methods. We, as you know, feel very strongly about that. We cannot call it medicine if it's not organic, if we're not testing for metals and pesticides and mildews. And I love what Julie's chiming in right now, that caregivers should be able to grow for more patients. And I think it's ridiculous that once you decide to be a caregiver, if you're not a patient yourself, you're then not able to grow your 2 rec plants too. So we're really limiting it and making it almost not an option for patients to have enough medicine, whichever direction they go.
So what do you think the best way to, I mean, when we talk about organizing patients, right, this seems like something that's in every patient's interest. How do you organize patients, and, you know, how do we create that change at the legislative level? You know, and how do we do it with, is it something that can be done with dispensaries? Is it something that can be part of tax and regulate? Because the point that I always try to make is that, again, if we're having a hard time with, let's say, 6,000 patients presently, how are we going to do 60,000 consumers who live in Vermont? How are we going to do 600,000 consumers who live in Vermont and or are traveling here from other states? So, you know, it seems to me like we have 2 big things that we have to do at once. One is dramatically increase the supply, but 2 is also dramatically increase the amount of testing, right?
Correct. And I would love to see the state step in and do the third-party testing consistently across the board for both rec and medical patients. I feel I really have a hard time saying anything bad about dispensaries because I talk to a lot of patients who are not comfortable in the black market or the rec market. So there is a great place for dispensaries. But it's been years, and the dispensaries have proven that they haven't stepped up to the need of the patient. So why would we then offer them the ability to try to step up for the need of rec as well?
Well, I think that, you know, it's inevitable that dispensaries are going to be a big part of, I think, the rec conversation, right?
Right.
And so, you know, is the answer then, and one of my questions here is how we would, you know, how you would change the medical marijuana program. Do you think that, you know, caregivers with a thorough testing program is a way that this can be fixed in the short term? You know, if we had something like the Maine caregiver law, but it included some testing, and also, I guess, can you sell directly to patients without testing? Because testing is expensive. So if you're a small caregiver paying $300, $400, you know, for a test, can you afford to be a small caregiver? How do those things fit together?
Well, if the state stepped in, hopefully they could make it affordable. Or you look at, how are we doing the quality check? Can you let someone come into your home as a caregiver and sample all your soils right there? That's what Clean Green does for their certification process. You know, at least one step of it. So what are other ways we can look at that to ensure the quality?
And do you think that Maine, you know, has pretty good as far as the scale and the numbers? I think it's, what, 99 plants per caregiver? Up to 99? You guys correct me on that?
My understanding was different of Maine, but I know they've swapped around the law a lot in the last year or two, so I'm not up to date on Maine. But I do love some of the ideas that they have, and the fact that caregivers, if they're doing a good job especially, should be able to help more patients. Not everybody, as you know, is successful and has that green thumb and can do this well, let alone organically, let alone have a good enough yield to make it worth it. So people who know what they're doing need to be doing this. And again, then I'll get on my whole tangent of why are felons not allowed to when they have a felon for cultivating and they're the ones that are growing the best cannabis out there.
Well, that's something that we talk about a lot, right? And I think that's something politicians can understand. If people are passionate enough about cannabis, they're willing to do it and risk their freedom. Those are the people that you want making the cannabis and growing the cannabis. You know, you don't want to shut out those people. You want to bring them in because they've got the passion, they've got the skill, and man, how much easier would it be if they could just run the lights with the windows open? You know, holy shit. Jessilyn, let's talk about how medical and tax and regulate might come together, and you know what you think. What are the opportunities and what are the risks?
I unfortunately do think that tax and regulate, if done well, could and maybe should put a hurt a little bit on the medical program because of the fact the medical program has had several years to get their act together. And it's unfortunate that we are, what is our grade? We're at an F right now?
I mean, if you're talking Americans for Safe Access, we were upgraded from a D, I believe, to a C minus. I want to say, yeah, Fran confirmed that earlier. We're a C minus, I think, from Americans for Safe Access. I'll pull that up.
Okay, here. I'm glad we were upgraded, but would patients say that? And we haven't upgraded any of our standards as far as the testing, and again, we're still calling it medicine. So with the tax and regulate market hopefully coming online at some point, that also needs to talk about the quality and the testing standards just as much as the medical does.
So do you think that there will be kind of one program and that patients will be able to have, you know, that's the other question too, is just purely about supply. So do we need to save X amount of regulated cannabis for medical patients? And do we need to save X amount, you know, so that it's not just, if you leave it up to the market, the people who are selling it to the public are going to sell it to the adult use public, not the expensive craft, you know, more specific strains that only a few patients need, right? So do we need to do supply protection for medical patients as part of that, or?
I do think we need to keep that in mind for sure. I do think patients need priority, and right now they're not getting that as well as they should be. So we do have to think outside of the box. And, you know, we have watched other states do it very different ways. We can learn from other states' mistakes.
So what do you think those big mistakes are that we should try to avoid here?
Well, I think especially, again, I'm right back on the organic kick. Look at California. How much of their cannabis has just been made, what's the word? They've been told that it's not even going to pass the inspection process to be able to be sold.
Because
so we're right back to the whole idea of we can crank out a ton of medicine, but if it's not clean, then it's not medicine, and what's the point of it?
So as far as, I guess, kind of tax and regulate, or maybe even just sticking with the medical, you talked about clean green. So that is, maybe you could explain that a little bit more for people who are not familiar with what that is, because we're going to talk about organic in another episode, and I've got some recorded conversations from the USDA that you guys are going to all be interested to hear. But maybe tell us a little bit more about clean green and why you guys think that that's the best kind of standard to use.
Sure, I'll do my best, but I probably won't do justice, Matt.
We'll do a separate show on it in the future, because I do want to get sort of into the details. But maybe you could just briefly, for people that have never heard of clean green organic, what is it?
Yeah, basically a gentleman who was a USDA inspector decided to start his own certifying organization specifically for cannabis. It's called Clean Green, and he has actually standards that are above the USDA standards to ensure quality of cannabis medicine. It's pretty, it's bigger on the West Coast than here on the East Coast, but we're trying to bring it to light a little bit more here. And the big difference for me with Clean Green is it goes a step above and beyond, not only with the amount of pesticides and microbials that they're testing for, but it goes above and beyond the USDA certification as far as stewardship and, the ecologically and ethically taking care of your land so we're not having major runoff and creating more problems for farms like we've seen other states do as well. So they just kind of step it up a notch, and it's a great way of really ensuring that if something is Clean Green certified from start to finish, that is the best we can get for cannabis in the country right now. That's as close to certified organic, above and beyond USDA style that we can right now.
Wow. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I know we have. I put it up here, the interview that we did with Chris Van Hook. We will definitely talk to you again in the future. We'll be talking to you guys about Clean Green, and we're going to talk about organic hemp cultivation at HempFest. Crazy how that keeps coming back up, guys.
HempFest is coming.
Jessilyn, I want to thank you. Before you go, how can people get in touch with you, learn more about what you guys are doing with Homegrown Consultants?
Yeah, and I should say I am a Clean Green organic certified hemp farmer, one of the first here on the East Coast, Clean Green Organic. But they can email me, greennursevt@gmail.com. Our website is vermonthempfarms.com for that, and Homegrown Consulting is on Facebook, and you can contact Matt and I, and we'd love to help anyone we can, any way, grow clean organic medicine.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Jessilyn. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for all you do.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Whew. All right.
That was a mouthful. There you go.
Yeah, need some water?
Yeah. That was excellent. Thank you to Jessilyn for joining us.
Hey, Jessilyn.
And thank you again to Chris for joining us. I want to come back and do a final wrap-up with you guys. Before we do that, we have got a little commercial for you guys.
All right.
You guys may have heard the Vermont Hemp Fest is a-coming, and I'm going to put up here on the screen, before we play the video, I want to give you guys a look at what we're doing here. Do you have the video? Do you want to do that first? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this is a sample. We just put this up on Facebook. We're going to announce every single one of the sessions on Facebook. So this is up here. First session of the day, happening at noon. This is Saturday, September 8th. State and federal hemp regulation landscape. So that's at noon. We've got Bernie Sanders' office confirmed. Is Bernie going to be there himself? I can't confirm that he's not going to be there. I can't say for sure he won't be there, all right? We have a representative from his office who's definitely going to be there. Vermont Agency of Agriculture, there. Senator John Rogers, state senator, hemp farmer, there. Vermont Cannabis Solution, all of our attorneys. They're going to be there as well. Here are a couple of the topics that we got, if you guys can't read them. 2018 Farm Bill implications. That's a huge, very, very important topic. Thank you, Sean. Existing Vermont hemp regulations, the new Vermont hemp regulations, and how to prepare, and the forecast for the 2019 legislative session. So, again, this is just a small taste of what we have coming up. Check it out on Facebook. We're going to keep rolling all these different sessions out. We're updating the website so that you guys can see. And if you want to get an even better sense of what this is like in person, I'll show you a clip of last year, and you can see the beautiful Burke Mountain Hotel and Conference. So,
we had a great time.
Let's roll that video and give these guys a little 1-minute preview of little taste of the flavor.
HempFest 2017 was a groundbreaking event. We brought hemp farmers, CBD producers, and people with an interest in the plant together to learn, share, and grow the community. feel the tangible excitement from the crowd. You could see the diversity in the people. We had everything from millennials to octogenarian farmers to everything in between, there to learn, share, and connect over what is arguably the most versatile plant in the world.
Yeah, me too.
No, we're not popping any.
All right, we are back. So, again, Vermont Hemp Fest 2018, it is coming up. Let me give a shout out quickly to all of our sponsors on here. Let's throw up the full screen. We have got a lot of them. Holy shit, look at all the people who are showing love at the Vermont Hemp Fest. EASO Goods, Grinder on the Table, Lily Hill, Northern Roots Nursery, Northeast Processing, our testing sponsor. Speaking of testing, Continuum. You guys are going to learn a lot about Continuum. Also, Icon Processing. The word processing is going to be very popular, as is the word extraction at HempFest this year. Eat More Hemp. Thatcher is going to be in the building, our edible hemp sponsors. Sensimia Lifestyle. Kaylee is doing some awesome trips and programs. There are bag sponsors. The Vermont Hempicurian, bringing all this love to the southern part of the state. They're throwing down for the lounge. Lost Nation Brewing, bringing you the extra funny jokes tonight. Our beer sponsors, as always, happy to have them. Humble Roots Horticulture, our safety sponsor, keeping us safe. The Vermont Hemp Nursery, big shout out to Joe, also to Peak Hydro. Joe and Denise, those guys in Plainfield are phenomenal. Stop and see them on Route 2. Cannaplanters, you guys know Will. We'll get him back here on the couch pretty soon. Me and Will hang out on the casting couch all the time. Ropana CBD, our yoga sponsors. Speaking of bending and getting flexible, Drew and Rachel will be there. And then Front Porch Forum, and yes, the 7 days Cannabeat. That's the 7 days Cannabeat. We love HempFest so much, and we want this to be a big event, that I do the thing I hate to do, which is spend money on other advertisers. I don't like doing it, but it's a good investment, so 7 days Cannabeat, they're going to be here. Check your 7 days for Vermont Hemp Fest advertising, and then call us if you want to advertise for real on the live stream. All right, fellas, let's get back to recap this. So let's one more time introduce our guests. We've got Fran, we've got Kevin, both patients. Fran, my kind of Jamaica. You've been a long time, one of the longest time who's still with us, advocates and activists here. Can you recap a little bit sort of what we heard from our guests and maybe kind of sum up, you know, where are we at with this program and what do we need to finally do?
Well, I think we heard some good things tonight from both of your guests that were online. Of course, we were listening kind of on the side here, so I didn't catch quite all of it. But it's very positive with what the gentleman is saying for Grassroots to progress forward in this manner, and we hope they do. And of course, Jessilyn has excellent points about what we're dealing with right now in the system, which of course is not all that fantastic. We're still encouraging patients to look at Maine if they can. You can be a patient in Maine for no cost. If you're a Vermont patient, all you have to do is ask your doctor to sign a form that you have sent from Maine, and we can connect you with a link on that. And you can go over there and experience what they're doing over there. And then maybe come back here and talk to your legislators and tell them what you think might work out. Because again, we're still very limited in the program. Over the last decade, it seems to have stagnated with both on the legislative level. We're not blaming the dispensaries on this. It's the legislature holding back quite a bit on the number of plants allowed, other situations as well. So we need to really open this up. I think Act 86 has done a wonderful thing by allowing everyone access in the state. And that's really where I see it right now is let's go forward. Let's continue to produce more cannabis, share the cannabis between people. If you're growing, or if you don't smoke even, and you want to grow 2 plants and you want to share with somebody, and you know you're going to grow it clean, you know you're going to grow it organic or in a safe manner, then that's the basic thing that I would suggest as we go forward before we can fully ramp out a program that works for everyone, especially the low-cost patients, which I think are the ones that have suffered the most. They can't afford what, unfortunately, dispensaries have to charge because of the cost of the fees and their overhead. And, but we're seeing in Maine over 3,000 caregivers. And we're seeing the whole program completely opened up with the recent changes in legislation. And I've been over there myself, and the products are clean, they're available, and they're reasonable cost.
And we'll see what happens in Maine too, if it's going to be like California or if it's going to actually evolve well, right? Because Maine's got a pretty good infrastructure going. You talk about all these caregivers, and I want to bring Kevin in here.
Yeah, I mean, he's been there too.
Yeah, Kevin, you're familiar. You've worked in Maine, and maybe you can give us a little bit of perspective what it's like in the medical marijuana business in Maine right now, and what kind of businesses exist and what they're doing.
It's incredible. A lot different than what we're doing just a few states over. In Maine, there's like he said, there's over 3,000 caregivers. I think it's probably closer to 4,000 or more. Yep. There's also 8 dispensaries. But with these caregivers, they can grow. They have a plant limit of 5 patients. So that's 6 mature, 6 immature per patient. But
okay, so 6 mature and 6 immature per patient.
Correct.
If I'm not wrong, they just opened it up so they can go beyond the 5 patient limit on the caregiver storefronts, because I was in one a couple of weeks ago.
Correct. So they can now sell to more than 5 patients.
But they're only growing for so many patients.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you could have 30 mature plants as a main caregiver.
Correct.
Pretty much. Okay.
And sell to, as long as you have a medical card, not only if you're a Maine medical patient, but like he said before, they accept out-of-state medical cards. And so that's actually how I got into the industry down in Maine for a little bit. I was a Vermont patient in the Northeast Kingdom. It was too far and too expensive for me to drive to the other dispensaries in Vermont. So I went the opposite direction and went to Maine. So I started going there, and I'm very impressed with what they have going on.
And was that a big part of what, when you were down there actually working in Maine? I mean, the caregivers, were they serving a lot of out-of-state patients?
Oh, yeah.
As well? Yeah.
I would say probably like a 60-40 split. Now, I was working in southern Maine, so that is a lot closer to Massachusetts, New Hampshire, but when we would have everyone from New Hampshire come into southern Maine, because just like myself, I was willing to drive 2 hours to Maine and 2 hours back because it was worth the price that I would save.
I was buying some kick-ass OG for $5 a gram on sale from $8 a gram. But when you're looking at a $20+ a gram here in Vermont, the difference is amazing. And if you're a cancer patient in Maine, you're spending anywhere between $30 to $50 a gram for your oil. And in Vermont, you're spending, I believe, anywhere between $90 to $120 a gram. So the difference in a 90 or 60 or 90 gram regime is quite a bit, 10,800 to 3,800.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, Fran, because I know that's one thing, especially that you advocate for with patients with plant counts, and even with dispensaries with plant counts, is that if you are making some of these medical products that people are using as medical products, whether it's RSO or FICO or a lot of the times these extracts, they take a lot of material.
Sure, you got a 30 grams of plant material for 45 grams of oil, depending on the quality of your material. So there's quite a bit. So you're going to need at least a pound to take care of one patient for one cancer treatment. That would be, approximate, depending on the material. But again, it's all over in Maine now. They've got it all completely tested before it goes in the machines. It's dosed precisely when it's coming out the other side. You can get a 1-to-1 cancer oils that doesn't get the patient disoriented. You've got a stage 4 patient with the mets in the bones, and you don't want the disorientation, but you want the healing, and that person can then take down the amount of oil they need. But it's that precisely dosed. With some of the products I've seen coming out of the dispensary, and I've actually seen the labeling on it, it wasn't quite that precise.
Yeah. So you've seen it from the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about politics, because you're super involved, and thankfully both you guys are, which is great. So bookending our kind of, age spectrums of patients. Kevin, who was one of the youngest patients when he got on, and Fran, who's one of the original activists for the medical marijuana.
Well, no, I don't go back 25 years.
Got a lot better head of hair than some of us on this stage right now. Yeah. So I'm not going to reveal your real age, Fran, but clearly the medicine's working.
I'm the old guy.
Let's talk about politics. Who's listening? How can patients be better heard? Patients need to advocate for themselves. Do we need to bring in more kind of Tiny Tim examples of people who are more physically clearly disabled? Sort of how can patients organize?
Well, what we're hearing, unfortunately, is that patients aren't getting what they need. And what I encourage every single patient to do, and many of them are becoming activists in their own right, which is, as you know, we only got Act 86 passed with a few thousand of our closest friends, Eli. You and I could have screamed to the rafters. But The thing is that people are standing up and understanding that they have the right to stand up now, where before they didn't really. I used to get patients coming to me and saying, who do I say anything to when I've got mold on my clones or my cannabis? And then they didn't really know they could actually call Lindsay Wells at the department and say, hey, this is happening. And then when they did, I think there started to become some action. But we really do need to take the testing independent. We need to make sure that if somebody doesn't get what they want, that they have the voice that they need. And so basically you go to your legislator, you go to your senator, you write them that email, you give them that phone call, you come right up in person and talk to them directly. And be specific and be very courteous, of course, at all times to our legislatures. I think that's the most important thing. David Zuckerman, our Lieutenant Governor, has been one of our staunchest supporters. As you know, he brought us into his office and we were able to get those votes that we needed to pass that bill. Our Senator Ballant in Windham County, as well as Senator White, and my own Representative Kelly Paya is fantastic. So you know your legislator, learn who your House member is. Many times I'll ask people and they don't actually know. So find out who they are. Give them a call and say hi. And say, you know what, I'm really glad you passed Act 86. Now I'd like to see something that's fair for everybody. Let the small farmer, let the small Vermonter gain in this. I know it's going to be difficult to put the systems together with all the testing that they want and the cost of these things. But in the end, if we lift all boats, if we can get every single small business, small farmer that already grows food for people and certainly doesn't have a problem doing that successfully and safely, up there along with the small growers to come out of the woods, then we'll accomplish what the government set out to do, and that is to relieve the pressure on the, take away the black market or the parallel market, which I consider to be the inside Vermont grower. And that's the thing that they've been pushing the most. So what I say is don't tax it too much and make the licenses fair and available. That's about it.
And I want to give some people a shout out who are chiming in here. Joseph, who chimed in with us. Make sure you guys tune in to Into the Weeds.
Hey, Joe.
Great program. Appreciate you tuning in here. Matt also chiming in here. Check him out. Clean Green certification as well.
Yep.
Scott, thank you for chiming in. Good friend of ours from Southern Vermont.
Scott Stoller, yeah.
Been there forever. David Hall, appreciate you chiming in.
David.
Some info in here.
We got everyone here
Yeah,
today.
got everybody here tonight.
Oh, the gang's all that. That's
Yeah.
why we love doing this.
Right, every Monday.
Everybody's invited. Everybody's invited.
Sorry you guys won't get to smoke that joint with us when we smoke my weed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we'll take some more, we'll let people, if they have more questions, they can add them in there, and, we will react to them, but we've had a pretty packed show here tonight.
Yes, we have.
And we are going to break this down. We'll edit it out so that people can listen to those interviews again in person. And we're going to talk to Jessilyn again for a dedicated interview. We're going to talk to Chris Walsh again, dedicated interview. And, I got to say, it's nice to be able to talk to the dispensaries. And, I've interviewed Shane on here, not on video, but on the podcast before.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's nice to have a direct line and have dispensaries join the conversation.
We all need to talk to everybody. I mean, I talk to, I know all these people, and we talk to them daily, and we just try and push it in the right direction and keep it going.
We get further ahead when we all work together.
I'd also like to give two big shout-outs. One to Sean behind the camera for busting his ass tonight.
Kevin Heady, there you
We got a
go.
little bit of a late start, but we're doing phone calls, we're doing video, we're doing all this. And the other one is Kevin's girlfriend, because we're keeping him late from his from his dinner tonight. So thank you all.
Don't kill him when you get
all
him
of our
home.
loved ones who make this possible. All right, well, you know what that means, guys. It's time to close it out with our favorite segment. Everybody on the count of 3, smoke your weed. Yes. All right. See, this is way better with more than one person in here. Thank you very much.
All right.
So we have a lighter?
We do, I think.
Like that? All right. So
like that.
let's put this right here on the
Where's the lighter? You got one?
so that you guys
Oh my God, we don't have a lighter. Oh no.
can see it.
It
I
could be
didn't
a
lose
problem.
it.
Oh no, I got it. Here it is.
I was going to say.
There you go. Okay.
Oh shit, we don't have a lighter. Is that in here? All right. So tonight, our guest on Smoke Your Weed, it's Fran. So,
Yep.
Fran, this is
Well, actually, this is something that was shared with me for everybody there. This is skunkberry, and we'll shout out to the hog, the grower tonight, for the shared weed.
the hog.
Yeah, the hog.
All right, what a great grower handle.
Yeah.
So, All right, without further ado, you guys know how we do this every single week. We do it the same way. We bring in a guest. And the premise of this segment, it's pretty simple. So this is your weed, Fran. Yes. Right here. And now I'm going to smoke it.
Yes, I know.
All right, smoke your weed. Do you want to tell us anything about this weed while I smoke it?
Well, the skunkberry has got a little bit of an indica twist, but it's a nice blend with sativa. It's very floral in its taste, and I mean, you can tell us right now. You're taking a hit. What do you think?
Confirmed weed.
Confirmed weed.
It's weed, guys.
It's weed, guys. Okay.
Back it up.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. You got a cough out of that one.
Woo!
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Smoke Your Weed. And thank all of you guys for joining us tonight as well. Here, we'll pass it to Special Denim. Big shout out to Sean behind the decks, Jam Creative for hosting us, our guests Fran, Kevin, and our call-in guest, Chris Walsh from Grassroots Vermont, Jessilyn Dolan, RN from Homegrown Consultants, and the Vermont Cannabis Nurse Association. Everybody, if you're smoking your weed out there, do not drive, get home safe, take care of one another, and keep it heady. Oh, and make sure you check out the HempFest discounts. Patients, Heady Vermont members, NEK residents, firefighters. I think we got one for everybody, so make sure you check it out. We'll see you guys soon. Peace.